It's your boy, Jason Muncie, Indiana Dweez. Now, well, what I'm proposing is that the second reason why that the X-Men franchise is not going to get a 3D movie is because the cartoons are not being pumped out. There hasn't been a said X-Men cartoon since 2006, like I previously stated in my last video. Now, we don't really need to have said, discussions about how the whole thing would go about, having said, type of story to, be written, because frankly, the whole story of the X-Men has already been written and told and shit like that. And yeah, with everything going around about the whole situation about the whole, oh well, why don't we just refuse to make any more X-Men cartoons that warrants a said base on the first ground basis of having said the whole said entirety of said 3D movie, but the whole Marvel thing had botched it since how they sold out to Disney. They sold out to Disney a long time ago, and that's what's causing the lack of having said movies being made in 3D. There hasn't been another good X-Men game, and well, I'm just saying, a basic premise is to change up the story. Maybe make only a few of the X-Men heroes into villains and have Wolverine become the villain, killing off basically almost every villain that every X-Men villain you could think of. And basically going about villainizing and turning Wolverine into a villain, or change up the story to make it more interesting. And yeah, and I'm just saying, just have a story, a full functioning story, to have more depth and more character. And basically what I'm saying is, going about the whole thing about having said story be placed firstly in said, you know, said comic books and then the movie itself. But these live action movies aren't helping anything. All they are doing is causing people to not want to watch the live action movies of the X-Men variety. Like, I mean, I just would like to treasure a movie that doesn't have shitty writing and the costumage is all off whack. Like, what happened to the early 90s or the early days of the early incarnations of Wolverine with his black, blue, and yellow attire?
Glad to see you too.
I'm just saying, we really need to start having a way, you know, a way to have like the 3D movie bringing everything back to the early incarnations of every single X-Men character. Basically going about turning the comic books into a CGI animated movie. But I highly doubt that the consistency of it will follow the original stories. But also adding in the fact that comic books are not always consistent. They keep changing every year. And every single year that they change, they end up losing continuity. The only movie or only franchise that can get away with not obeying continuity is the Friday the 13th or any slasher film movie. Those are the only kind of movies that have the right to not obey the continuity. Because the rights to franchises go changing hands once every 20 years. Once every the said continuity changes depends on the you know, based on the studio who purchases the rights to a slasher film movie franchise and changes it to their liking. And basically what I'm saying is, comic book movies that are superhero comic book movies are not allowed to change the continuity of the original story, of the original thing. Now, what we know of so far is that the continuity changes but varies. Basically, changing up the continuity of a comic book based movie is so disrespectful. This Logan movie shit is getting out of hand. Like, y'all y'all aged Logan up too damn fast. I mean, at Logan or Wolverine's old age, he can barely even fight. He barely still has it in him to fight. And plus, with the way things are going with the X-Men series, there won't be a 3D movie. But only things could go from bad to worse for the franchise. Marvel hasn't put out a good X-Men movie or a good X-Men cartoon in years. And it needs to be said, if we keep on having problems like these, granted that the X-Men series will never ever come to light, since how Disney bought out Marvel, and the X-Men franchise will never be the same, and will never have a 3D movie incarnation of it made.
I'll remember this one.
Yep. We'll never, ever, ever have a 3D movie. Because X-Men, that series has been dead since 2006. They barely put out live action movies based on the same damn name. There aren't very many live action movies anymore. And I'm just saying, we really need to start pushing out all the other useless garbage that Disney has. Not also that, Disney's losing all of its iconic mascots one after another. Starting with the original Mickey Mouse from the very first cartoon. Then it's gonna be all iconic characters, animated characters that Disney owns, going into the public domain. Like, you can't even going about the whole thing about, oh, why don't we just, just keep hold of some old mildewy garbage, such as shit that Disney doesn't need no more. Disney's pretty much a recognizable fucking company. They should never no longer need their mascots. I mean, they already got a bunch of other shit. They've already thrown away the Pooh Bear series or whatever series
No way to fight a lady.
that has Pooh and Piglet. Like, we have like X-Men that is being pushed so far down the card. Yep. Basically pushing the talented series down the card. And there isn't very much that X-Men could do but just sit there around the low card. The bottom carders shows that were on top at one point in time. And to be honest, the only place that Marvel actually thrived was on Cartoon Network. And I'm just saying, Marvel thrived when it was owned and syndicated by Warner Brothers, Fox, and Cartoon Network. Marvel has thrived with that shit for years. But ever since Disney bought out Marvel, the whole X-Men series has been forgotten about. There hasn't been another X-Men movie or another X-Men cartoon in years. Now people barely buy the X-Men comic books because they're so irrelevant these days. And X-Men is starting to become so irrelevant because, frankly, it's not justifying and provoking a 3D animated movie like the G.I. Joe series did. And what I propose is that if Disney gives back ownership of Marvel itself back to the Marvel company, Marvel Comics, I mean, there's been only Spider-Man stuff being most popular. Spider-Man and the Avengers shit is getting popular. I mean, if chances are that basically, if the Avengers and Spider-Man keeps on getting pushed, the Fantastic Four and X-Men will be the only series that will be pushed down the card. But there's too many Marvel comic series that aren't being pushed. It's all this Spider-Man and Avengers thing going on right now. X-Men don't stand a chance. Not a chance in Tartarus to come back from the loss of fan base and the loss of revenue. And won't be getting a 3D movie. There's been Marvel's Avengers and Marvel's Spider-Man cartoons being made still to this day. And the comic books are still going on. Like, come on. You can't honestly expect me to not cover this kind of issue. And it's the most untalked about issue for X-Men, the series. And let alone X-Men is having a problem coming back. It's dying a painful death. A violent, painful death for a franchise to suffer. And we won't be able to get another X-Men video game ever. Basically, the X-Men series only is going off of fan service value via by fan art that's either hentai or some shit like that as a last resort to keep the popularity of X-Men alive. I mean, I grew up on that X-Men shit as well. I mean, it's getting to the point to where X-Men is going to have a very big old problem and a very big old issue about stating coming around to, being the best series, but I don't see that happening. I honestly see the apocalypse coming towards the X-Men franchise. And the judgment day of the comic books is coming to fruition. people are abandoning the X-Men franchise, and the X-Men franchise and the X-Men owners, or the X-Men owner, will have to face facts and stating the whole fact about there being a doomsday for the series. Basically, it's inevitable. X-Men will be dying within the next 20 years as the rights and ownership within the next 20 years or so, maybe even 30 years, maybe 40 or 50, maybe 70 years or 75 years. Basically, it'll be in the public domain and everybody will get on the action. And as soon as people pick apart the originally established lore,
I love meeting new people.
basically coming about the whole death of a franchise, basically what I'm saying is going about having like a long since dead franchise be in the public domain,
I'm walking here.
and as a way to keep it relevant, as I'm stating the fact, we have no 3D X-Men movie. I mean, you could classify the current Spider-Man cutscenes or cinematic cutscenes from the Spider-Man video game as classified and considered pass-offable as a movie of the 3D kind. But we don't have a 3D X-Men movie because X-Men has been long since dead. And the X-Men cartoons are never coming back into the public eye ever again. We will not see the X-Men cartoons be as popular as they once was back in the 80s, back in the 90s, and even in the 2000s. And 2006 was the last year for the X-Men cartoons, because comic book sales of the X-Men variety have tanked, plummeted, and dropped from 2007 up until now. From 2007 to 2022, the first ground basis of said cartoons and comic books hadn't been sold and haven't been made and haven't been viewed from 2007 to 2022. The era of X-Men is going to come to an end, and there won't be very many or if any commercials for the toy lines of the X-Men characters. I mean, getting it while the getting was good was back in 2006. The very last year, the very last cartoon of the X-Men variety has been made and died. Disney brought out Marvel just to squash the talent of the TV show, not giving a big WWE style push as a babyface series, but became a fucking heel series and pushed down the card And Disney pulled a Marvel version of the Montreal Screwjob against the X-Men series of Marvel. Like, we can't have nice things? Seriously? And then the 3D movie. Don't get me started on that aspect. That will never happen. I mean, it's getting to the point where a lot of people is starting to hate Marvel. Too much Spider-Man and too much Marvel's Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy bullshit. Where is the variety in all of that? That of itself will have negative connotations and negative effects on Marvel as a brand. But I'm just being a little bit biased here. Maybe looking on the bright side of things. I mean, come on. We might be at some point in time in the future, if any of it goes through, we might see something. But as time moves on forward, we might as well end up going about the whole thing about having a potentiality for it. But just as always, this has been your boy, Jason Muncie Indiana Dewey's, talking about Marvel and signing out. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, and turn on notifications.